big news coming out of the NWSL today.
Yeah, for sure. So we're referring to the club release from Kansas City Current. They have announced that they have parted ways with now former head coach Matt Potter, in light of what they refer to in the statement as leadership issues related to his leadership and employment responsibilities. In this same release, we get a statement from General Manager Camille Ashton that says, "We watch the play on the pitch, we keep a pulse on the locker room, and we are constantly evaluating ways to improve our club. Through our ongoing process of continuous improvement, we believe now is the right time for this change." So we have an update on the status of Potter with the club moving forward. They make a point to address that this isn't entirely results related by stating in the release that it's issues around leadership and employment responsibilities. And they also point to a next step in this process as well. They have gone ahead and named assistant coach Caroline Quablum as the interim head coach. In the meantime, Lisa, your initial reactions when you saw something like this drop?
Yeah, I mean, it's never good to see when breaking news like this happens where someone is essentially getting fired. That's my words, not the club's words. They said parted ways, but it basically means like something went wrong. What happened, right? And we don't know. We don't have all of the answers for everyone. We know what Kansas City has put out there and what the league has put out there, but I don't think that this, as you mentioned, like it can't be all results related at this point. It cannot be based on like how everything else has gone. Kansas City, their 3 straight losses to start this year, which no is not great, especially after you're coming off of a championship appearance. But you have to look at how Kansas City started last year as well. They didn't win a game until like 5 or so games into the season, and then they end up winning playoff game after playoff game and making their way to the championship. So there's a lot of different factors that come into this and kind of what the ultimate decision or why the ultimate decision was made. And um, basically saying that issues around his leadership and employment responsibilities leads me to believe that it's a little bit more with how he conducts himself as a coach and not necessarily why they have not won a game in their opening 3 games, because the team on the pitch has been dealing with a lot of injuries and a lot of people are not available for them. So it seems to me to be something off the pitch entirely.
Yeah, I think when you take a look at how Kansas City has gotten off to the start that they have this year, you look to something like those availability reports right away. We know that this team has had lots of players on the IR, not up to speed at this moment. And there, I think, maybe has been a little bit of grace in terms of those results as players start to go ahead and really get into the long grind of what a regular season is. And I think with some of the phrasing, within the press release, especially utilizing the word parted ways. I think when I was, for me, in my reaction to this, when I'm receiving that and reading it, I'm immediately kind of jumping back into the last couple of seasons,
Yeah.
headlines around the league that we have covered. If there is going to be a dismissal, a parting of ways, termination, etc., whichever the phrasing is that clubs are using, in this instance, a parting of ways, if you're going to use that over the last 2 years, considering the headlines around the league, that there needs to be some kind of reference to the why. I do understand the legalities of things, and maybe you can't always be as transparent as you can right away. There's things to take into consideration, like protections and things like that for whomever in
Hmm.
the instance. But I think the club did a good job of pointing to a why.
Yeah.
He stated issues around his leadership and employment responsibilities. That automatically tells us within the first couple of sentences of this release that no, this was not entirely just results based. And for I think folks who follow the league, maybe not necessarily like the once in a while fan or even the casual fan, but really like the diehards, fans who have been really invested in this league and have been around to know and see and stay updated about everything that has sort of transpired over the last couple seasons. Those folks kind of take a look at this and probably wonder the same, because I think if you're looking at that phrasing and then you're trying to draw conclusions from things. I mean, this is the same team that also had a slow start in 2022, but they went ahead on a run,
Yeah.
closed out in fifth place, and marched all the way to a spot in the 2022 NWSL championship final. So they didn't
And
have a win in their first 5 games of 2022. So to try to maybe make a release and just tie it right around a 3-game loss might have been even more suspect, I think, to some folks who are diehards of the league.
when looking at Matt Potter and kind of his journey to today's breaking news that he has parted ways and the club have parted ways with Kansas City Current, he was hired in January of 2022. So after Kansas City's first season back in the NWSL or in the NWSL. And as you just talked about, didn't win a game until game 6 in the NWSL season, took them all the way to the championship. And I right, like they're now 0-3 to start this season. But I would argue that Kansas City, I mean, we've talked about it on here, had one of the best off seasons in acquiring players, their draft pick in Michelle Cooper, getting Dabinia, one of the biggest free agents available on the market. So there's a lot of positives there, like in terms of what we could see as outsiders on what was happening on the pitch. And that's purely about like the performance base of this team and kind of how they were able to play. Now, you mentioned as well that Caroline Schwablum is going to be stepping in as the interim head coach. This is a coach that was welcomed onto the Kansas City team just January of this year. So at the very start of this regular season, brought on as an assistant coach. She's the former Swedish national team coach. She's been a technical staff member of a number of different organizations, a former player. So now she's stepping into this. I think the timing of all of this announcement is also pretty interesting because the Challenge Cup kicks off tonight and Kansas City is on the road. They are in Houston getting set to play their opening Challenge Cup game tonight, Kansas City against Houston. And now Squablum has to step into that head coaching role at this immediate moment ahead of this game. And also the players have to go out and play a game tonight after this news has just broken and became public. Whether they're just learning about it too. We've heard that over the last couple of years and all of the different changes that have been happening in the NWSL with departures and firings of coaches and parting ways, that sometimes the players don't even find out until the news gets public. So imagine being a player and you're a couple hours before kickoff of a game time, you're getting ready, you're mentally preparing, you're having your pregame meal, and you see this news or you hear about this, or now this news goes public. You still have to put your head down and play a game tonight. That's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, I have to. My hope is that there are different protocols in place for when a club has to go through an announcement like this, and that the players were informed of that, especially as they're already on the road. They're in Houston. They're going to play a game in hours, literal hours at the time of our recording a reaction to this news. So I would anticipate and hope that they were informed. Obviously, Quablon has been informed. That was included in the next, the next step of this release. What is it going to mean for the team moving forward? Well, Quablon will be the interim for this team throughout the duration, perhaps even of the season. That's something else I thought was something important to note within the release. There's a next step. They say, hey, Caroline Quablon is going to be the interim head coach. And the assumption within there is that there's going to be a search for a head coach, but it's not stated necessarily within the release. And I think that'll be kind of maybe like the next immediate step for the club. They have something in place for now. Perhaps Kansas City, turns things around, and maybe Quablon creates a bit of a resume for herself with this team moving forward. But I think if you are on the administrative level for this franchise with one eye ahead, I mean, 2024 is another double expansion year. Um,
Yep.
there's going to be competition for coaches, although it has been reported out there that the Royals are going to name a head coach very soon. But there's likely going to be a lot of competition for the Bay Area position as well. And who knows how the coaching landscape will look at the end of
Mhm.
the 2023 season. There's always um, new positions to be filled, it sort of feels like, when covering head coaches in the league. Um, but it makes me even more curious now how the game might go tonight. Lisa, we just did
Mhm.
a preview of this team in their Challenge Cup game, and I think you and I both went Houston Dash in that one. Just to
Mhm.
remind folks, if you didn't watch our live this morning, we did a Challenge Cup preview. Go check it out. I'll bring a little bit of that on here. We both went with Houston. And we did cite, some of the injuries or the absences that players who won't be available for Kansas City, and some of those things kind of we leaned into in terms of how we were making our pick. And I don't know, maybe do you want to change a pick here? Do we want to maybe say that something like this maybe give a different
Yeah.
perspective for a team, moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will change things, but honestly, no, I don't think it'll help Kansas City that they've gone through this, and we both picked Houston to win. I think the same kind of goes for me. It's a lot for players to have to deal with that off the pitch and then go on and play a game and win. And
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, it may help them, right? It may lift them up knowing that Potter's not there anymore, but I think it'll be a lot more difficult for them to deal with this and handle it.
Yeah, very curious to see the tactics of Caroline Quablam and what she's going to bring out. And I want to give you a special shout out, Lisa, because I always intro you into these episodes as broadcaster, and that information is very important because when you and I saw this news, we also needed the immediate resource on how to pronounce the name
Yeah.
of Caroline Quablam. And thankfully for the broadcasts, a lot of times they are given the pronunciation of the names by the player or by the coach or by the assistant coach. And it was very cool to hear Caroline Quablam pronounce her name the way she wants to have her name pronounced. And that's us utilizing it
Yeah.
here on the
I
show.
mean,
So
you're giving me a shout out. I'm shouting out Jen Cooper because
there
she's
you
the one that
go.
does all the work behind the scenes for the NWSL, making sure every player, every coach says their own name, how they want it to be said. And sometimes the players will say it in their native language or accent, and other times, then they will repeat it Americanized. And this is how Caroline says her name. So this is how we're saying it. But yeah,
We're
um,
gonna get introduced to the
yeah.
problem era for sure, very quickly, in a matter of hours. So I know I'll be watching. I'm sure others will be watching as well.